welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking into the story of Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road.
Oh, yeah.
And specifically, we're going to be looking at a bunch of news articles from the last week or so.
Yeah.
All about Ross Ulbricht.
Right.
And his pardon
Yeah.
from Donald Trump. So this should be a really interesting one.
Absolutely.
We're going to kind of look into who Ross Ulbricht is.
Okay.
The rise and fall of the Silk Road.
Yeah.
And then all the controversy around his pardon.
Yeah, this is a case, I think, that gives us a glimpse at the future that was to come in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of technology and law enforcement and
kind of
crime and punishment and
how they were already kind of butting heads back then.
exactly.
Yeah, so first of all, like, who was this guy, Ross Ulbricht? We're not talking about, like, some, career criminal who, was
Right.
born into, the wrong side of the tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
This guy was an Eagle Scout,
Wow.
had a physics degree, had a master's in material science. You'd think he'd be off, designing spaceships or something.
Right.
Not,
It's an interesting juxtaposition. You have
Yeah.
this guy who's, obviously very bright, very capable.
Yeah.
But he was also really drawn to this idea of libertarian economics.
Yeah.
This idea of a completely free market, no government interference whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
He was really into Ludwig von Mises,
Oh, wow, yeah.
who championed those ideas.
Yeah.
And he even got into the philosophy of agorism,
Oh.
which is basically taking that free market concept
Uh,
and applying it to actually, living outside the traditional system.
wow, so it's like a science brain, but also a radical libertarian.
Exactly.
And so that kind of leads him to create the Silk Road,
Yeah.
right? It's like his experiment
Yeah.
of, can we actually put these ideas
Right.
of like a totally unregulated market into practice?
Yeah, and he sets this thing up
Yeah,
on the dark web
right.
using the Tor network.
Yeah. And
Unfortunately-
for people who don't know, can you explain the Tor network briefly?
Sure. So the Tor network, it's basically, think of it like a digital maze. It makes it nearly impossible to trace where users are coming from or where they're going.
Right.
And he was doing this in the early days of Bitcoin, too.
Yeah.
Which added another layer of anonymity
Yeah.
to the transactions happening on Silk Road.
So it was all about anonymity and just being free from all regulation? It
Exactly.
was like the Wild West, but digital.
Yeah, it really was. And,
Yeah.
it took off. It became this huge marketplace for all kinds of stuff.
The kind of stuff.
Primarily drugs, illegal drugs, but also
Oh, yeah.
counterfeit documents, money laundering services, even weapons sometimes.
Wow. So it was like eBay, but for illegal stuff.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a site that facilitated over 1.5 million transactions,
Wow.
an estimated $213 million in total revenue,
Jeez.
with over 183 million of that coming from drug sales alone.
So it was like a serious
It was a game changer.
business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the head of it all was Ross Ulbricht, but he was hiding behind this alias Dread Pirate Roberts,
Right.
which always struck me as a little theatrical,
Yeah.
like straight out of The Princess Bride.
He's out of The Princess Bride.
So I always wonder, like, was that just like a playful pseudonym,
Yeah.
Or did he actually start to believe that he was this Dread Pirate Roberts character?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Was it just a fun alias, or was it more than that?
Yeah.
Did it reflect something deeper about how he saw himself
Yeah.
operating outside the rules?
Yeah. And for a while, he was getting away with it, too.
He was.
But the FBI, they were on his tail.
Right.
And in 2013, they finally caught him
Yeah.
in a San Francisco library, of all places,
Of all places.
with his laptop still logged into Silk Road.
That's right.
And that's where those digital breadcrumbs come in.
Right?
Yeah. So even though
You can try to be anonymous online,
you can try.
but every transaction, it leaves a trace. It does. And the FBI, they had to piece together all of Ulbricht's online activity, connecting it to this Dread Pirate Roberts persona.
Yeah.
It was a massive digital forensics investigation,
Uh-huh.
a landmark case.
Yeah, and they threw the book at him.
They did.
Drug distribution, money laundering, computer hacking.
Yeah.
Even the Kingpin statute, which is usually used for, like, mafia bosses.
Right.
Ulbricht, he admitted to creating Silk Road,
He did.
but he claimed that he had handed control of it over to other people
Right.
after a few months,
Mm-hmm.
and that he was kind of lured back into it just to take the fall.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, the prosecution argued that Silk Road, it directly contributed to the illegal drug trade.
Right.
They said at least 6 people died from overdoses
Yeah.
linked to drugs that were bought on Silk Road.
And then there was that whole thing about the hitmen, too,
Yeah,
right?
right. There were allegations that he had tried to hire hitmen to take out 6 people he considered to be threats to Silk Road.
Yeah.
Although there's no evidence that any of those hits were ever actually carried out.
Right.
Now, the defense,
Yeah.
they painted Ulbricht as, a naive idealist,
Right.
someone who got in over his head. They said he was just a facilitator, not a drug dealer. And they argued that Silk Road actually made the drug trade less violent because it moved it online, took it off the streets.
It's an interesting point.
It is an interesting point.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the jury, they didn't buy it in 2015.
Yeah.
Ulbricht was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole.
Which is even harsher
Yeah,
than what the prosecution was asking for.
that's right.
Yeah. And that sparked this whole huge debate
I did.
about whether that sentence was just way too extreme,
Yeah.
for a nonviolent crime, especially compared to what some people get for, violent offenses.
Absolutely. And it raised a lot of questions
Yeah.
about, was this appropriate for a first-time offender, even given the scale of what he did?
Wow.
Or were they trying to make an example out of him
Right.
to deter other people in this new digital world?
Yeah.
It really showed how much we were struggling
Yeah.
to apply these old laws to this new digital landscape.
And that's when things get really interesting.
That's where the Free Ross movement comes in.
Right.
This movement that really gained momentum, portraying Ulbricht as this victim of government overreach,
Yeah.
almost like a political prisoner.
Yeah, like he was being punished for his beliefs, not his actions.
Exactly, and that the punishment didn't fit the crime.
Right.
Now the cryptocurrency community, especially those who believe in Bitcoin,
Right.
and these decentralized technologies as the future, they were particularly vocal in their support for Ulbricht.
Yeah, they saw him as kind of this visionary who got punished for being ahead of his time.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then there's Donald Trump.
Right.
He had considered Ulbricht's case back in 2020.
He did.
But he ultimately decided against giving him clemency.
Right.
Because of those allegations about, ordering hits. But then fast forward to 2025.
Yeah.
He gives Ulbricht a full pardon.
A full pardon.
No strings attached.
Wow.
And in his statement, Trump even said something like, the people who put Ulbricht away were the same lunatics who are involved in the modern-day weaponization of government against me.
Wow.
So he's really...
That's throwing some fuel on the fire.
Yeah, he's framing this as like, this is part of like the deep state or whatever, trying to get him,
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously Ulbricht's supporters were ecstatic.
They were thrilled.
About the pardon.
Yeah.
But then other people were furious.
Of course.
They were saying that, his crimes were just too serious, especially, the possibility of him trying to have people killed.
Right.
You can't just ignore that.
You can't just sweep that under the rug.
And that's really, I think, what's at the heart of the controversy here, right?
It is.
Was Ulbricht a visionary?
Yeah.
Who was unfairly punished for challenging the system?
Right.
Or was he a criminal mastermind?
Yeah.
Who got what he deserved?
It's not an easy question to answer.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
The Silk Road case, it really makes you think.
It does.
What are the limits of online anonymity? Where do we draw the line between personal freedom and responsibility to society?
Yeah.
And how do we deal with crime in this constantly evolving digital world?
Yeah, those are questions that are more relevant than ever.
More relevant than ever.
And we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for part 2.
Okay.
Where we're going to delve even deeper into the Silk Road.
Sounds good.
We're going to unpack the arguments for and against Ulbricht's pardon and really explore what all of this means for the future of the internet.
I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. All right.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the story of Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road.
Yeah. Last time we left off with Ulbricht receiving that pardon from Trump.
Right.
And that really brought all the conflicting opinions about him and Silk Road right back to the surface.
Yeah, it really reignited the debate.
It did.
So on one side, you have his supporters
who
see him as a nonviolent offender. Even like a political prisoner.
Yeah, like he was punished for his beliefs, not his actions.
Exactly.
And, they see Silk Road as this attempt to put these libertarian ideals into practice.
Right.
Even though, it definitely crossed the line into illegal activities.
Yeah.
But they argue that, Ulbricht himself, he never sold drugs.
Right. He just created the platform.
Right. He was just the facilitator.
Yeah.
Not the actual dealer.
And some even say that Silk Road actually made the drug trade less violent.
Right.
Because it moved it online.
Took it off the streets.
Right.
And then there's the whole issue of his sentence.
Yeah, that life sentence.
That life sentence.
Seems way too harsh.
Especially for a non-violent crime.
Yeah, especially compared to what some people get away with.
Absolutely.
For, violent crimes.
Yeah, and, for a lot of people in the cryptocurrency world, especially those who are really into Bitcoin and the idea of decentralized systems,
right.
Ulbricht is almost like this heroic figure, someone who was ahead of his time.
And paid the price.
And paid the price for it.
Yeah.
But, of course, there's the other side of the coin.
Right, the people who say he was a criminal.
Yeah, who say that, no matter how you spin it, Silk Road made it easier for people to access dangerous drugs, addictive drugs.
Which led to, overdoses and deaths.
Exactly. And then there are those allegations.
About the hitmen.
Yeah. Which even if they never happened.
It makes you wonder, how far was he really willing to go?
Exactly.
And they say that by pardoning him, Trump basically downplayed all the harm that was caused by Silk Road.
Right.
And sent this message that, if you're wealthy and connected...
You can get away with anything.
You can get away with anything.
Pretty much.
Yeah, so it's really like a clash of worldviews.
It is.
But, you have these people who see the internet as this,
This wild frontier.
Yeah, where anything goes.
Right.
And then you have people who are like, no. The same rules.
Same rules apply online.
Should apply online as in the real world.
Exactly.
But either way, this whole case...
It raises some big questions about how we regulate online marketplaces.
Right.
What role should anonymity and privacy play?
In the digital age, yeah.
And how is technology changing the relationship between the law and the individual?
Yeah, Silk Road really showed how much law enforcement was struggling to keep up with technology.
Right. It's like they were constantly playing catch-up,
yeah,
trying to figure out how to police this digital world.
Yeah, where the old rules just don't work anymore.
Exactly. And it made everyone start to think,
yeah,
are our current laws even effective?
Right.
Do we need new laws specifically designed to deal with online crime?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah. And it also got people thinking about, the ethical responsibilities
of these platforms.
Yeah. Like if you create a platform,
yeah,
do you have a responsibility for what happens on it?
Even if you didn't intend for it to be used for illegal stuff.
Right.
Yeah, and then you add cryptocurrencies to the mix.
Right.
And it gets even more complicated.
Yeah.
Because, they offer this anonymity.
Anonymity and decentralization.
Which, can be great for privacy.
Right.
And financial freedom.
But they can also be used for all sorts of bad stuff.
Yeah. It's like, we opened this Pandora's box.
We did.
And we're still trying to figure out
how to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, where do we go from here?
That's the big question.
What did we learn from Silk Road?
Yeah.
And how do we apply those lessons to the internet today?
Well, one of the big takeaways, I think, is that the internet has fundamentally changed the nature of crime.
Yeah.
It's created these new opportunities for criminal activity.
Right.
And it's blurred the lines
between the physical and digital.
Worlds.
Yeah.
In ways that we're still trying to wrap our heads around.
Yeah. It's a whole new landscape.
It is.
And it also showed us that,
anonymity and privacy.
They can be good and bad.
They can cut both ways.
Yeah. They can protect people.
Right.
But they can also be exploited.
Exactly. So finding that balance is going to be really important going forward.
And I think the most important lesson maybe is that technology itself isn't good or bad.
Right.
It's just a tool.
It's a tool.
And it's up to us.
It all comes down to how we use it.
To decide how we use it.
Right.
Yeah. So, we have to decide what kind of digital world we want to create. What are the ethical boundaries?
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that this technology
benefits everyone?
Yeah, not just a select few.
And that brings us to, I think, the lasting impact of Silk Road.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just this one-off event.
Right.
It really paved the way for a lot of what we see online today.
Like what?
Well, I mean, everything from the darknet markets that followed in its footsteps to the rise of cryptocurrencies and, you know, all the debates about privacy and control in the digital age.
Yeah, I mean, Silk Road really showed us
the potential
of anonymity and decentralization.
To disrupt systems.
Yeah.
To empower individuals.
But also the dangers.
But also the dangers that come with that.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
What would the world look like if everything was completely decentralized?
Wow.
No central authorities.
No governments.
No governments, no banks.
Wow.
It's a fascinating idea.
It is.
But it raises a lot of questions, too.
Yeah, like what would happen to law and order?
Right. Could we prevent chaos and exploitation?
Without some kind of central authority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that everyone benefits
from these technologies?
From these new technologies.
Yeah, not just the people who are tech savvy.
Right.
Who are wealthy enough to, you know.
To get in early.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are questions we're still grappling with today.
We are.
And, you know, the answers aren't clear.
No.
But one thing is certain.
What's that?
The impact of Silk Road is still being felt. And its legacy
is still shaping the future of the internet.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that we're all part of this digital evolution.
We are.
And the choices we make, the lines we draw,
the rules we create,
they're going to determine what kind of digital world
we leave for future generations.
Exactly. Yep. So, as we move into the final part of our deep dive, let's shift our focus to the future.
Sounds good.
All right, so welcome back to our final part of this deep dive on Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have, like, from Ulbricht's, early life.
Right.
And the whole rise of Silk Road to his arrest, his conviction.
And then that surprising pardon.
And that unexpected pardon.
Yeah.
And we've seen how this case sparked these huge debates.
Yeah.
About, crime and punishment.
In a digital age.
In the digital age, yeah. Anonymity, privacy online.
What happens when these powerful new technologies come on the scene?
Yeah, like Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so, I think one thing's for sure is that Silk Road didn't just disappear.
It didn't.
When the FBI shut it down.
No. Its legacy is still with us today.
Yeah, it's still shaping,
how we think about the internet.
How we think about the internet. Its potential for good and bad.
And the future of the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Silk Road was almost like a sneak peek.
Yeah.
Into the future. It foreshadowed so much of what we see online now.
Right.
Like all these darknet markets.
The rise of cryptocurrencies.
The decentralized finance movement.
Yeah, it showed the power of these concepts.
Right.
Anonymity, decentralization.
Challenging the system.
Giving individuals power.
Yeah, and for law enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, worldwide, it was like...
a wake-up call.
A wake-up call, like, okay...
This digital world.
This is a whole different ballgame.
It's borderless. It's fast-moving.
We can't police this.
The old ways just don't work anymore.
The old ways don't work anymore. And for policymakers, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was like...
our laws.
Our laws weren't written...
They weren't designed for this.
For the internet.
For the internet age.
Yeah.
And we're still seeing that struggle today.
We are, yeah.
I mean, all the debates around, online piracy... cyber-terrorism.
Online harassment.
How do we regulate these new technologies?
It's tough.
It is.
And then you throw crypto into the mix.
Right.
Which adds like a whole other layer of complexity.
Yeah, I mean...
anonymity, decentralization.
Great for privacy.
Financial freedom.
But also opportunities for illicit activities.
Yeah, it's like Pandora's box.
It is.
We opened it, and now we're dealing with the consequences.
We're trying to figure out how to manage it.
And
it's a constantly evolving situation, too.
Yeah, because the technology just keeps advancing.
At an incredible pace.
So fast.
Yeah, so...
the challenges are just going to keep getting more and more complex.
So what are the big takeaways here?
Okay.
Like, what did we learn from Silk Road?
Well, I think one of the key things is that the internet has fundamentally changed how we think about crime.
Yeah.
I mean, it's blurred the lines between the physical world
and the digital
world.
Yeah, and it's created all these new opportunities for criminal activity
that we never could have imagined before.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's also highlighted how anonymity and privacy
are double-edged swords.
Yeah, they can protect people. But they can also be used by people who want to exploit others.
All right, so how do we find that balance?
Yeah, that's going to be crucial.
That's going to be key going forward.
Yeah. And I think the biggest takeaway is that technology itself isn't the problem.
Right.
It's neutral.
It's a tool.
Yeah. It can be used for good or bad.
It's up to us.
It all comes down to us.
To decide how we use it.
As individuals and as a society.
Yeah, and that's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
Like we have the responsibility
We do.
to shape how these technologies are used.
Set the ethical boundary.
Make sure that the digital world we're building
benefits everybody.
Yeah, not just a select few.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final question to think about.
Okay.
Think about the potential of these decentralized technologies.
Like Bitcoin.
Like Bitcoin. They have the power to change everything.
Did you?
To empower people to create new forms of economic organization.
To challenge the power structures that have been in place for centuries.
Exactly.
But they also have risks.
Of course.
You know, the potential for misuse.
Facilitating criminal activity.
Maybe even making existing inequalities worse.
So the question is, how do we harness that power for good?
Right.
While minimizing the risks?
Yeah.
How do we build a future where the internet benefits all of humanity?
That's the big question.
That's the question we all need to be thinking about.
And there are no easy answers.
No easy answers, but one thing's clear.
What's that?
The Silk Road, for all its darkness and controversy, it forced us to confront these questions head on.
It did.
And the conversation that it started is still going on.
Still shaping a digital world we live in.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that we're all participants in this digital evolution.
We are.
And the choices we make, the lines we draw,
the rules we create,
they're going to determine what kind of world we leave behind.
For the generations that come after us.
Exactly. So thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a wild ride.
Down the Silk Road, it's been fascinating.
Yeah.
And sometimes unsettling.
Definitely.
But it's a glimpse, I think,
it is,
into this really complex world that we're all creating together.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.